Good morning, guys. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Some of my husband's contractors showed up randomly at my door, so I had to help them get some things out of the back. So today we are talking about chapter 3 in Getting Good with Money. I unpack a lot of stuff in chapter 3. A lot of stuff about managing all the basics of managing your money, from budgeting, managing expenses, all of those kinds of things. But what we're going to be really focused on for the purposes of this live today is on the expenses part. So I go deep in setting up a budget. I call it the quick start budget within chapter 3. Like I said, I'm not going to go through that on the live here, but I do have on my Instagram profile under videos, I do have a tutorial that I did a couple of years ago where I just kind of quickly showcase how to use the quick start method. So if you've never set up a budget before or you've never been successful with it, highly recommend you go and watch that video. I will reshare it in my Instagram stories later today, so you can also check there to take a look at it. But we're gonna be talking about expenses today because obviously with inflation, I think we all are concerned about where our money goes and how we spend it. I'm going to be reading through 2 different sections today. I'm going to pause in between the different sections to kind of discuss some things. So if you have the paperback version, we're going to be starting on page 35 under Prioritize Your Expenses. When it comes to getting your budget balanced, you're going to have to determine which expenses are important to you and which ones are not. To me, living a real life on a budget all comes down to knowing what you want to spend your hard-earned money on and what you don't. To do this, you have to list your priority expenses. What bills are the most important to your family? The obvious ones, of course, are your rent or mortgage payment, taxes, utilities, and food. But after those, which discretionary expenses most contribute to the well-being of you and your family? So to help you think about this, go back and think about your vision of the dream life. Like, what do you want in your life? Then look at your overall expenses with a very critical eye. With each expense, ask yourself, does this help me achieve that dream? So for example, my dream was to be a stay-at-home mom. It soon became obvious that eating out and taking expensive vacations would prevent me from living that dream. So I eliminated those expenses, hoping my short-term sacrifice would lead to my long-term satisfaction. It did, and it will do the same for you as well. So perhaps your dream is to own a home, or the exact opposite, like having the freedom to travel. Does your gym membership allow you to achieve that dream? How about all the streaming subscriptions you pay for? I am not arguing that you will need to cut every little thing from your spending. I am saying that you should make sure you're not spending mindlessly on things that don't truly matter to you. So here's where you're really going to have to battle against the cultures of YOLO, you only live once, and FOMO, fear of missing out, and the reality TV that sells you an ideal of what it looks like to have money. Your income is your greatest wealth building tool. If you spend it all, you won't have any left over to build actual wealth. I know it seems obvious, but the reality is that we often mindlessly spend our money. It's important to spend our money wisely and in accordance with our overall dreams and goals. As Jesus said, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verse 15. Life is so much more than a flashy new wardrobe, a vacation, or the latest and greatest deal. The key to budgeting is in knowing where you're spending your money. It's true whether you're a saver or a spender. Where we spend our money matters. When we're trying to reach big goals, saving goals, debt payoff goals, or retirement goals, the way we spend our money directly affects how quickly we will achieve those goals. This is why we must define our true needs and wants. Not being able to differentiate between the two is one of the biggest reasons that we struggle to make any headway financially. This doesn't mean that you must live uncomfortably. It just means you need to get very clear on what is important to you and what's not. Without this clarity, you'll struggle to gain any momentum in reaching your overall goals. And so let's talk about priority expenses real quick, because as I said, the obvious ones are paying for your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, your insurances, and food on the table. But what outside of that is a priority to you? Some people prioritize paying for their children to go to a private school. Some prioritize paying for gym memberships. Like I have a friend who religiously goes to Burn Boot Camp 5 days a week. It is something that she really enjoys doing, and it's a priority for her and actually for her husband as well, and it's something that they do together. There's no shame there. It's a priority expense that they have determined together. For me, if I was paying for Burn Boot Camp, that would not be a priority for me, and I would in fact be wasting my money. And so in this process of determining what's a priority or not, I'm gonna say this a little weird, but I'm hoping that it sticks with you. I want the thought process behind determining what your priority expenses are. I want this to haunt you all day today. I want you to really, really think super hard on, okay, what is a priority to me? Is this thing that I'm spending money on, standing here at the convenience store buying these things, are these a priority to me? Why or why not? As you're paying bills, is this a priority bill to me? Why or why not? This is important because it just puts things into perspective of, of just determining what matters to your family. And you need to also do this with your spouse as well. Ask them what's a priority, because something I will tell you, my husband, a priority expense for him is he absolutely loves paying for expensive insurances. I don't know why. Me, I would go with the cheapest insurance provider ever. Seriously, could care less who they are, anything about them. I will just pay for the cheapest insurance possible. But for my husband, he believes you get what you get, or you get what you pay for when it comes to insurance. So he values having an expensive insurance policy. That is something he values. That's a priority expense to him. And for me, even though it's not a priority to me, it's not detrimental to our overall goals, so long as we are clear on what's a priority and what's not. So make sure you also talk to your spouse about this if you're married, about what they deem as being really, really important, and maybe some things that they think are maybe not important. And you might be shocked by what they say. Maybe they come to you and say, hey, I don't really think that it's that important that we pay for these 7 streaming subscriptions. We don't watch any of them. We only watch these 2, so why not cancel these ones? This can bring about and facilitate some really good conversations, and this can be an important exercise in helping you determine where within your budget you can cut expenses, because if your family is like mine and trying to pay for groceries right now is really difficult. It's very difficult to try to figure out how much groceries are going to cost week to week. And, but by going through this exercise, you can determine, okay, well, these expenses here are not that much of a priority for me. So maybe we can eliminate or reduce them. And that's what we're going to talk about next, is eliminating and reducing these expenses. But you first have to determine what's a priority and what's not. So like I said, all day today and even this week, I really want you to be thinking about and asking yourself the hard question, if whatever it is, every time you go to spend money, again, whether it's paying a bill or you're standing in a store or shopping online, ask yourself, is this a priority? Yes or no? We are emotional beings, so sometimes emotions kind of play into that. And so we just need to dig deep and ask ourselves maybe why those emotions are coming out. So maybe for maybe if you have been paying for a gym membership, maybe you're paying for one and you really want that to be a priority, but maybe your actions have said that that's not a priority. There's no shame or no guilt there at all, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. It just means that it's not a priority in the season of your life and that it's okay to get rid of. So just keep that in mind, because emotions are probably going to come up as you think about this and go through these expenses. All right, so now we're going to talk about eliminating and reducing our expenses. So once you've listed out which expenses are a priority, you will need to go through all your other expenses and determine which ones can be eliminated or reduced. Now, with the extra wiggle room you created in your budget, you can find a new home for that money. You could use it to pay off debt, put it into your emergency fund, save it for a new car, or set it aside towards your retirement. It's totally up to you. I would suggest putting your extra money toward just one of these goals and making this goal a priority in your budget for now. Then once that goal is achieved, you can move on to achieving the next goal on your list. So here's a suggestion on how to determine which expenses to eliminate or reduce. Ask yourself if the expense is one that you can live without, even just temporarily, but it's just one that you could live without. If it is something you could go without for a while, eliminate it. Typical expenses that can be eliminated include entertainment, like concerts, plays, sporting events, dining out, extracurriculars for the kids, vacations, cable and streaming services, and expensive hobbies. If it is something you can't live without, like groceries, ask yourself if there are potential ways to reduce this expense. So typical expenses that can be reduced are groceries, utilities, insurance premiums, internet and phone service, and rent or mortgage payment, which you can usually negotiate, obviously before the current world we live in. You can always refinance your mortgage once mortgage rates come back down. And so when it comes to reducing your expenses, sometimes it's as simple as a phone call to your current provider to see if they have any promotions that would reduce your monthly bill. Other times it may require a little more legwork. As suggest when trying to find a cheaper provider for things like insurance, you call an independent agent, since they can gather quotes from various insurance providers to help you find a less expensive policy. If you work from home, see if your employer would be willing to pay a portion of your internet bill or even your phone bill. If you own your own business, talk to a CPA about having your business pay for a portion of your internet or cell phone bill through an accountable expense reimbursement plan. Seriously, if you're a business owner and you use the internet at your house and you use your cell phone for your business, talk to your CPA about getting the accountable expense reimbursement plan. It'll save you a lot of money in your taxes. For us, putting our quick start budget into action was both freeing and a little intimidating. We loved the ease of figuring out the flow of Pat's paycheck for the week, but we didn't really see eye to eye on the expenses that needed to be reduced. Remember when I was talking about the insurance policy? Here it is in full detail. I was willing to go with the cheapest insurance policy and provider there was. However, Pat is such a staunch believer that you get what you pay for when it comes to insurance. Needless to say, he was not willing to budge on insurance, so we had to find a compromise. Pat was willing to negotiate with our current provider to find us the best rate without sacrificing our current policy, and he agreed to give up eating out for lunch to afford it. And just so you know, for those that have followed me for a while, you know this about my husband. He's always been weird about leftovers. Like he, for years of our marriage, would not eat leftovers. He, for some reason, believed that once food was cooked and you put it in the fridge, I guess it went into the fridge to die. That's not how I am. I believe that, food goes in the fridge and you just keep eating it until it's just gone. That's just how I was raised. But he definitely does not like to eat leftovers. And so he, in order to make a footing for this insurance, he had to learn how to bring his lunch every single day instead of eating out every day. And he actually now will eat leftovers. Not often, but he still does. So this is just one of the many compromises we had to make during our financial journey. So don't fret if you and your spouse don't see eye to eye on the expenses that need to be eliminated or reduced. Work to find a compromise. You're a team and teams work together for the common goal. So sometimes the best thing you can do for your budget is to be aware of how much you're spending and whether you're spending it on things that truly matter to you and your family. And so that is the goal for this week, is to just get very clear on our expenses, on determining our priority expenses, really thinking through them, and then going through all of our other expenses and our priority expenses and determining which ones can be eliminated or reduced in order to make more wiggle room into your budget. Because like I said, I think for most of us, we're dealing with the effects of inflation and it's eating up a lot of our income, and our income is our greatest wealth building tool, and we want to protect that and preserve that as long as possible. So that's why it's so important that we get down to the nitty gritty details of where and how and what it is that we're spending our money on. So then that way we can make solid financial choices for our family, and we can still provide the things that we actually need to provide for, like food on the table and paying our normal bills. So your challenge this week: write down your priority expenses, get very clear on what's a priority to you. Ask your spouse, talk to your spouse about it. If it's awkward and weird, send the replay of this video to your spouse and say, hey, I'd really like to discuss the content of this video with you tonight after the kids go to bed. Me and my husband still do this today. Your first conversations about money with your spouse might be really awkward. Just putting it out there, it might be awkward. It's gonna feel weird. Maybe there might be a little arguing in there. It happens. But I promise you that with practice in discussing these kind of weird and awkward topics with your spouse, they will get easier and they will get better with time, and they're so good for your marriage. So stick with it, even if it's awkward and weird, stick with it. But like I said, go through this with your spouse, talk about what they think is a priority expense, compromise where you can compromise, and then talk about how you can eliminate and reduce these expenses. And if you're not married, talk to your mom, your sibling, or your best friend, someone that you can trust to have these conversations with that kind of help you get out of your own head and think through some things. Because they might be able to point out like, hey, you've been paying for this one thing and you're not really using it, or it hasn't really benefited you, so maybe you should let go of that. And these conversations are really good to have. They're hard and they're awkward, but they're really good because sometimes we do need to come out of our own heads. So there you have it. Your challenge is to go through your expenses, list the priority ones, figure out which ones you can eliminate and reduce, and stick with it.